The Epstein scandal has resurfaced in the headlines, and the silence from our leaders is deafening. Americans deserve answers, not further elite cover-ups. If transparency is truly valued, why are both political parties avoiding the tough questions?
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
Moss NBC reports that Trump is visibly upset with supporters who mention Epstein. When the president, who campaigned on transparency, reacts strongly against his own supporters for raising questions about Jeffrey Epstein, it raises a critical question: who truly holds the power? This story resonates deeply because it touches on issues larger than politics, power, secrecy, and the right of ordinary Americans to demand transparency from their leaders. Is the goal to protect the powerful or to safeguard the truth? Let's see what we've got here.
They told you you could get a house for 5% down. That was responsible. Suddenly your house is foreclosed upon. The economy is tanking. And none of them are getting punished. There was this sense that the elites did not play by the same rules as you and I played by. And frankly, it was a true sense. That's something I've heard articulated recently by Democrats as well, right? Going back to the financial collapse. So you have that on one end.
This approach starkly contrasts with the previous administration under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which failed to curb financial excesses or restore trust in the system, instead perpetuating the policies that led to these crises. Despite promises of accountability, real transparency remains elusive. Whether it's dealing with Wall Street, foreign entanglements, or scandals like Epstein's, there's a tendency to shield insiders. Americans rightfully demand accountability from all political leaders, but the Democrats have mastered the art of contradictions, publicly advocating for one course while following another. Contrastingly, the current administration is tackling the root causes of these issues, addressing inflation, cutting unnecessary regulations, and confronting globalist agendas that undermine the American economy. Despite this, there's a continued push from some political quarters for more government intervention and bailouts, suggesting that those who contributed to the problem should be trusted to solve it. The financial collapse exposed a stark disparity. Elites, whether on Wall Street or in Washington, played by a different set of rules. The Democratic Party has long claimed to champion the underdog, yet when critical situations arise, their alignment with financial elites becomes apparent. The reality is that so-called responsible lending practices, like putting down just 5% and buying multiple properties, ultimately hurt the average American, not the well-connected. They gambled with other people's money, enjoyed the profits, and when the bubble burst, it was the working and middle class who suffered the consequences. The pressing question remains, how long will hard-working families be expected to adhere to the rules when the elites consistently do not? Fast forward to today and we see a similar pattern.
If he turns his back on Trump, then he's going to go after you. But ultimately, if you're Saudi Arabia, if you're Jeffrey Epstein, if you're the Goldman Sachs CEO, if you're the NVIDIA CEO, he wants to extract love and admiration from you. And so that's the nature of the way in which he thinks about relationships with the powerful, and Epstein obviously fell into it. And for a lot of folks on the right, they're seeing this play out because the commitments to do something about Epstein were wound up by Trump himself. He goes on Fox News in 2024 in the middle of the campaign, and it says very directly to them that, yeah, I'm gonna release the Epstein files.
Anything less only widens the divide and reinforces the belief that the system is rigged. The administration's reluctance to fully disclose the Epstein files, despite significant public interest and previous commitments, risks alienating those who advocate for a populist anti-establishment approach. When elites are protected from consequences while ordinary Americans must adhere to the rules, trust in our system deteriorates. The Epstein scandal exemplifies this disconnect. This has only increased grassroots frustration, who view this not as a partisan issue but as a measure of accountability for the powerful. If we are committed to putting America first and draining the swamp, we must demand accountability from all influential figures, whether they are foreign dignitaries, Silicon Valley billionaires, or disgraced financiers like Epstein. Within the conservative movement, there is a growing demand for genuine transparency and justice, not just for political gain, but to restore trust in our institutions. The pursuit of closer ties with Gulf monarchies, which often conflict with American principles, deserves as much scrutiny as the relationship between Wall Street and Washington. Americans deserve straightforward answers, not dismissals or accusations of partisanship. The American public is increasingly disillusioned with political theater. Grand gestures and photo ops with foreign dignitaries and CEOs do little more than maintain the status quo, protecting insiders from scrutiny. When it comes to relationships with influential figures, from the Saudi royal family to Wall Street executives and tech moguls, Washington exhibits a consistent pattern that go beyond political parties. It remains to be seen whether these deals will genuinely benefit American workers or merely enrich a privileged few. despite promises to disclose all related files and expose the extent of elite misconduct. The administration has only made symbolic efforts, offering vague excuses to protect reputations. The message is clear. Transparency and justice are not partisan concerns. They are the pillars of a free society.
In evangelical culture, you'll have movies that make in giant amounts of money about child trafficking. Child trafficking are words that you hear constantly in parts of the right. There is this conviction that child trafficking is happening all over the United States of America, often directed by elites.
In terms of sourcing, MSNBC often leans on academics and analysts who frame trafficking within broader debates about misinformation and moral panic, rather than amplifying the first-hand accounts of survivors or the efforts of prosecutors and investigators. This stance may obscure the fact that trafficking is a bipartisan issue that affects communities regardless of political affiliation. A notable strength of MSNBC's approach is its scrutiny of political actors who use trafficking narratives for personal or partisan gain. While MSNBC acknowledges the existence of trafficking, it tends to downplay the scale and urgency emphasized by law enforcement and victim advocacy groups. When networks like MSNBC cover this topic, they often adopt a skeptical tone regarding the motives and accuracy behind the conservative focus on trafficking, at times labeling these concerns as conspiratorial or politically motivated. MSNBC's coverage also tends to frame the evangelical and conservative emphasis on trafficking as a cultural or political issue rather than a response to documented criminal activity. The pressing need for all media outlets is to treat child trafficking as the serious, nonpartisan issue it is. The data is unequivocal. Trafficking is a criminal enterprise that devastates thousands of lives in the U.S. each year. Visually, MSNBC excels in polished storytelling through effective use of graphics, interviews, and archival footage. This concern is grounded in reality, as recent government data confirms the ongoing threat of child trafficking. The networks focus on progressive experts and commentators, while neglecting voices from law enforcement, survivor advocates, or conservative policymakers who are actively fighting trafficking can skew the narrative. The focus often remains on the political controversy surrounding trafficking, rather than the actual victims or the efforts to rescue and rehabilitate them. This approach can disconnect viewers from the real and personal impacts of trafficking. Elevating survivor voices, supporting transparent investigations, and holding officials accountable, regardless of their political affiliation, are essential steps. The network often selects statistics that minimize the problem or suggest it's exaggerated by conservative groups, rather than fully engaging with complete data from sources like the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which has documented over 112,000 cases and identified more than 218,000 victims since its inception. Anything less risks perpetuating the very impunity and opacity that many Americans, across the political spectrum, are increasingly rejecting. Over the past year, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received more than 18,000 reports of potential child sex trafficking, with 1 in 6 missing children in the U.S. showing signs of being trafficked.
And that's what they think about Donald Trump, and that's what they've thought about Donald Trump from the beginning, which to all of us sounds really odd because Donald Trump was Epstein's friend, for crying out loud. Donald Trump has a history of sexual misconduct. But this is core. This is fundamental to why some of these people are even with Trump in the first place. And so for a lot of them, believe it or not, this will shock a lot of listeners or viewers. This is the very first time they will have thought that Donald Trump has lied.
The Epstein controversy goes beyond personal relationships and salacious headlines. It exposes how the system protects its own. The relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, well documented through social circles in Palm Beach and New York, exemplifies the widespread connections among the wealthy and powerful. Demanding full disclosure of the Epstein files is about restoring faith in the principle that no one is above the law. As the administration promotes its efforts to cut unnecessary regulations and confront globalist agendas, it must also tackle uncomfortable truths, even those involving its own ranks. The Epstein case, like previous financial crises, highlights how the rules bend for those with the right connections, leaving ordinary Americans to pick up the pieces. The reluctance to release these documents despite repeated promises deepens the sense of injustice and fuels speculation that powerful interests are being protected at the public's expense. The challenge is to break this cycle. When political leaders fail to enforce accountability, it erodes trust not just in government, but in the entire financial system. This frustration spans the political spectrum, reflecting a growing demand for transparency and justice, particularly as Americans see their economic fortunes influenced by those at the top. This is why there are widespread calls for congressional hearings and independent investigations, because the American people deserve answers, not more political theater. When examining the financial and political implications of these revelations, it's crucial to focus on how elite networks operate and the consequences for everyday Americans. Meanwhile, calls for more regulation or government intervention, often proposed by those responsible for the problems, do little to restore confidence. The demand for answers is not going away, and the expectation that those in power will be held to the same standards as everyone else remains strong. Small business owners, for example, may hesitate to expand or hire, fearing the system is rigged against them. Consider the broader economic landscape. Investor confidence often wavers in the wake of scandals, leading to market volatility that affects retirement accounts, home values, and small business growth. At its core, this controversy tests whether the system can reform itself or if the same patterns of privilege and impunity will persist. Across sectors from real estate to technology, the perception that elites are shielded from consequences has a chilling effect. Can you believe this? When Americans seek answers about Jeffrey Epstein, all they receive from the previous Democratic administration is silence, stonewalling, and contempt. If our leaders dodge basic questions, it could be because they fear what we might uncover. Under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, transparency was perceived as a threat and the truth a liability. In contrast, President Trump has prioritized America's interests over those of globalists and elite networks. This isn't accountability, it's fear. The real danger lies not overseas, but within our own borders. Leave your comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's keep holding them accountable. Good day, good evening, and good night.